Hi everyone, welcome to our session, The Cloud as a SupTech Enabler. I'm Philippa Martinelli from the Cambridge Centre for Alternative Finance, and I'm delighted to be joined here today by a panel of expert speakers from the supervisory space, but also from the private sector. Here with me are Lauren Dom, Chief Technologist, Worldwide Federal Financial Services at AWS. We also have Anne Leslie, Cloud Risk and Controls Leader for Europe for IBM, and attorney Eugene Tevez, Managing Director of the Technology and Digital Innovation Office at the Banco Central Filipinas. Thank you all for joining me today. We are going to talk about cloud adoption trends in supervision. We know that cloud-based solutions are increasingly being used to modernize financial supervision, allowing scalable, secure, flexible infrastructure and advanced analytics. And some of you may have seen in our State of SupTech reports that there's an increasing use of cloud technologies for things like data storage, processing, and deployment of supervisory applications. We see this as an advanced technology and one that takes some work to implement, and there are obviously some barriers and challenges that we'll discuss today. But there are a lot of strategic benefits. The cloud can help financial authorities to overcome infrastructure constraints, scale more effectively, and even collaborate cross-border. So with that as context, I'm going to hand over to our speakers. So we're going to share insights from both the private sector, but also from the supervisory side, looking at some practical use cases and opportunities for collaboration today. So Anne, I'm going to turn over to you first. Could you share some insights from your perspective into how cloud platforms are driving innovation in SupTech applications?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I'm delighted to be here. What we have is a really exciting problem statement. I prefer to frame it as an opportunity space. Typically, we might characterize the public sector as being slower to adopt technology in general or advanced technologies. And I prefer not to vehicle those tropes. What I would prefer to say in this space is that there is a higher bar in terms of what good looks like, in terms of supervisory authorities being the guarantors of the very sensitive and very privileged information to which they are party. So all cloud relationships require the management of a third-party relationship, and with that comes both opportunity and risk. So the capabilities, what I would say probably is that technology in a lot of ways is the great equalizer. So while there is always a hierarchical relationship between financial entities who are supervised and the supervisory authority doing that, in a lot of ways, there's, like I say, an equalizing effect of technology. Everybody is learning. And what everybody is trying to figure out is, where do we place the cursor in terms of embracing technology to drive objectives? And what risks are we willing to accept? What discomfort are we willing to accept? So the ability to have scalable technology that can flex on demand, to build in resiliency, to architect in a way that we are leveraging the breadth and the depth of the technology that cloud providers can bring, and simultaneously not taking on more risk. That's something that I'm seeing both in the private and the public sector. And what I would love to see is that there is a kind of a symbiotic relationship between the two in terms of sharing learning. And I'm sure we're going to get into that more. But it's essentially around data analytics, driving the capabilities of mapping and visualizing the interconnectedness of the financial system, identifying concentration, seeing where there might be early warning signs of that could be a problem, might we need to intervene? Those kind of things. It's very exciting, it's challenging, but I'm very hopeful that this is going to be a space that drives very successful outcomes for the whole ecosystem.
Thanks, Anne. I think some really important points there around managing the risk of implementing new technologies, but actually the risk mitigating effects of successfully implementing these and being able to benefit from the innovations that the cloud brings. Eugene, I'd love to bring you in on this question. From a supervisory perspective, how are you seeing cloud platforms drive innovation in your work?
All right, so good morning, and well, I'm from the Philippines, so it's evening where I am. So I'm very glad to be here, Philippa. I like the fact that Anne mentioned about using technology as an equalizer, and I believe that's where cloud can be a very good enabler in terms of equalizing the various, let's say, bank supervised entities in terms of adopting technology. I mean, if we're talking about maybe a decade, 3 decades ago, there would be a need to invest a lot of investment is needed for a bank, for instance, to really set up its IT company, its IT organization, and invest on its on-prem infrastructure. But nowadays, you don't really have to invest that much, and this actually affects banks, smaller banks, as well as rural thrift banks, especially, let's say, in a developing country just like the Philippines. Now, in BSP, in the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, we are shifting towards more digitization, and our supervisory processes are trying to evolve as well and to go to digital transformation. Now, one thing that we've adopted in terms of SupTech is our advanced SupTech engine for risk-based compliance, which we call Asterisk. This is a cloud-based solution that we've developed to streamline and automate regulatory supervision, reporting, and compliance assessment of our supervised entities on cybersecurity risk management. So we've seen the power of cloud to enable this solution to be able to deploy it quickly, as well as the scalability that it can offer. Scalability is allowing us to actually be able to deploy this to more banks. So we've started back in 2023 with a few banks, supervised entities, but starting 2025, we will be deploying to all banks in the Philippines, as well as VASP, or the virtual asset service provider, that we also supervise. So we do really see that the cloud solution is enabling us to scale better, as well as to lower costs in terms of its operation.
Thanks, and I think it's a really valuable point you've both made about the benefits for the industry and therefore the benefits for supervisors in that interaction you have with the organizations that you're supervising. Laurent, I know you've done a lot of work, including with the Financial Conduct Authority here in the UK, and actually implementing cloud solutions for SupTech purposes. Would you like to share a little about the kind of FCA as a case study and your experiences of going through this process with them?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Philippa, to having me. It's a great honor to be speaking here, also with my co-panelists. I'm going to share my screen, and you should see my presentation coming up. And just confirm that you see the presentation.
We've got it. Thank you.
Perfect. So today I will walk you through the prototype that we've built in collaboration with the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK to accelerate the senior managers regime process from months to days. So SupTech is an ever-evolving journey driven by the continuous innovation in the financial sector, emerging risks, and relentless pace of technology change. It's therefore important to allow for iterative and continuous learning, collaborative and knowledge sharing in agile SupTech technology, and to take a modular approach when it comes to building your SupTech solutions across the different layers of the stack. So to give you a very brief overview, for the FCA Senior Manager Regime solution, we focused on 3 building blocks of the AWS SupTech Innovation Stack. We used Amazon Bedrock, which is our AI engine, then Amazon Kendra as a retrieval augmented store, and DynamoDB as a key value store for the responses and documents that we ingested during that prototype. Now, as all of you are aware, the senior managers regime is designed to establish clear individual accountability within financial institutions by ensuring senior managers are fit and proper for their roles and have well-defined responsibilities. And therefore, financial services institutions need to submit suitable candidates to the Financial Conduct Authority for pre-approval before the candidates can take such positions. Now, today, the Financial Conduct Authority regulates around 50,000 firms, and part of this regulation includes validating that senior managers for regulated firms are fit for the job, since they can have large industry-wide impact in such high-level roles. Every year, the FCA receives approximately 60,000 applications, of which about 7,000 are for senior manager applicants, and only 10% of those applications are in a position to get pre-approved upon receipt. So the rest, though, needs further investigation by ultimately the caseworkers and the applicants' firms. So 90% of the applications eventually get through the process, which means that about 40 SMR caseworkers and applicant firms are spending significant time in improving the 6,000 applications per year. So the caseworkers who review these applications have a deep subject matter expertise in the nuances of what good looks like for a specific role. And the cases are expected to be resolved in a maximum of 90 days, which is challenging as there is no really picture of what exactly does good look like. So there are many permutations, as there are valuable role holders for the many business model sizes and maturity stages of the firms the FCA regulates. And so the process to review these applications requires reading through all the materials ultimately that the caseworker gets from the firm. So the prototype that we've built specifically focused on the senior managers regime fitness and proper assessment, specifically Fit 2.2. Its objective was to reduce the amount of time and effort a conduct authority caseworker needs to spend reviewing the documents. It's also aimed to provide regulated firms with corrective actions within days of the SCA receiving the documents, rather than waiting weeks for the caseworker to compile a list of actions. And so by reducing feedback time, the FCA not only provides a better experience for the applicant firms, but also pauses the 90-day SLA clock, as it becomes the applicant's responsibility to fix the open issues and ultimately resubmit the package. So how did we approach this challenge? We first tested 5 different AI models and selected Claude 3 Sonnet from Anthropic as the best performer for this use case. We then created a system where the AI reads through the application documents and automatically answers specific questions based on the candidate's qualification. Beyond just finding answers, the system also identifies potential gaps in the candidate's experience or qualifications, and then automatically searches through the documents to find how the firm plans to address these gaps. To make this work further effective, the team used a specialized database called Amazon Kendra that allows for intelligent searching of documents based on meaning rather than keywords. And this means the AI can find relevant information even when it's buried deep within hundreds of pages of documentation. So when we look at the success of this project, hinged on creating an effective partnership between FCA caseworkers' expertise and capabilities, rather than attempting to fully automate decisions, the team designed a system where the AI acts as an intelligent assistant to experienced caseworkers. The caseworkers' deep understanding of what makes a good senior manager was carefully translated into specific instructions, so the AI prompts. For example, when evaluating a chief compliance officer application, the AI was taught to look for particular competencies and potential red flags, but the final assessment always remained with the human caseworkers. The team developed a systematic approach to refining these instructions through extensive testing and feedback, and created over 700 different prompt combinations, carefully tracking which ones produced the most accurate and useful results. And so this iterative process allowed the caseworkers to find ultimately the right balance where the AI could quickly surface relevant information and identify potential gaps while leaving the nuanced evaluations to the human experts. And so this approach has transformed what was previously time-consuming manual processes into one that can provide initial insights within minutes, allowing caseworkers to focus their expertise on evaluating the quality of the information rather than spending the time to find it. So what have we learned from this prototype? The prototype successfully demonstrated how AI technology can transform the Financial Conduct Authority Senior Manager Regime Application Review process, reducing initial assessment time from weeks to minutes. And so using Amazon Bedrock, the AI service, the system effectively analyzed complex application documents, automatically answering specific questions and identifying potential gaps in the candidate's qualifications. The solution also showed that it could accurately retrieve relevant information from hundreds of pages of documentation and provide caseworkers with actionable insights within minutes rather than weeks. So the big essence here is that the human collaboration approach proved particularly effective with the AI serving as an intelligent assistant to caseworkers while leaving final judgments to human expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurent. And I think that piece around bringing together various bits of advanced technology, cloud, AI, but also that real need for human interpretation and interaction. And I guess starting really, as you did at the beginning of the presentation, with a real understanding of the use case and how that flow works within a supervisory authority, in order to be able to then adopt the technology seems to be really key in what you've just explained.
Absolutely.
I'd like to just highlight to everyone. So in the platform, you can see there's a poll which we're going to discuss the answers to at the end. But if you're watching this, please feel free to answer that poll, and we'll be talking slightly to some of those questions shortly. So, what's the biggest challenge your organisation faces in adopting cloud technology? On that theme, Eugene, I'd like to come back to you. When you were implementing Asterisk within the bank, what were the biggest challenges you faced organizationally? We've talked about the benefits in terms of scalability, in terms of cost reduction, but what were the biggest hurdles you had to cross?
I think initially we had some difficulty in terms of the technical expertise requirement, especially on cloud deployments. In addition, we also need to be knowledgeable on the cloud contracts and terms and conditions. I think that in itself is a hurdle. And maybe Anne and Laurent can add, but as a government institution, we have fixed procurement laws. Our procurement laws actually, I mean, just in the Philippines, we are just adapting to the cloud technology, cloud contracts just this year. And this is mainly because of the experience that we have, and we have to really raise and escalate this to our to our procurement. No, that's the Department of Budget for us, which controls the procurement process, and therefore that's the biggest hurdle. And until we were able to find a way to be able to contract with a cloud provider, that was the reason why government, probably I would say, would be the last sector to adopt to cloud because of these restrictions.
That makes complete sense. And do you have kind of perspectives from the IBM side? Are those similar to the challenges you've seen in implementing some of these solutions?
So I think the industry, and I mean that in the broadest sense, right? Everybody who's participating in it, be public sector, private sector, for this to be successful, we all need to understand the relative constraints that we all have. So as Eugene says, there are constraints for very good reason in relation to public procurement. And then there are things that will be defining characteristics within cloud providers in terms of how cloud providers are architected, designed, and operate in order to deliver the characteristics of services and deliver the cost economics that clients are often looking for. And what I'm always a strong advocate for is to practice what I term radical curiosity, which is to really understand what's being asked, and then what is the space within which we can problem solve. So how might we? And there are sometimes very strict rules which offer very little elasticity and very little leverage. Then it becomes a decision about the commercial posture that a given provider wants to adopt, and whether or not a provider decides they want to play in a particular industry or a particular sector or a particular space. And trying to practice, to borrow the term from business writer Jim Collins, he talks about the genius of the and, right? So trying to break what is often a false dichotomy, saying, well, this is how it is, and it can't be any way different. I try, a lot of what I do is conversation facilitation and mediation, trying to break deadlocks to say, how might we? And the shift in mindset of, well, we, and it could be a we in any organization, we've always done it this way. Well, how might we, without hurting ourselves, how might we shift how we show up? And in so doing, we empower ourselves to be more successful in our chosen line of business, and also empower customers to benefit from what we're trying to bring to market. So there is a lot of mindset shifting here, and Laurent mentioned it, you know, the shift in behaviors, the shift in how we think about things, the perception that a change is not necessarily a concession. So there's a lot going on in that space, and most of it boils down to people wanting to build trusted relationships, because whatever a corporation or a supervisory authority says, it ultimately boils down to conversations between people and the quality of those conversations.
Yeah, and the right communication is so important always in building these partnerships. You spoke a little about the kind of way that cloud solutions are architected and designed. I wonder if you have any reflections on kind of public versus private cloud, because obviously they're kind of different challenges in terms of some of the risks for supervisory authorities and the implementation as well.
So in those kind of discussions, again, I try to get our stakeholders and our prospects and customers to articulate what they're scared about and actually put words on it, so that we can start turning fears into requirements, because with requirements, we can offer solutions. But unless we articulate and get words put on the things that are often unspoken, we can't solve them. So a lot of what turns into requirements in relation to public or private boils down to being very clear about what risk an organization is willing to take on, what they're permitted to do. In certain jurisdictions, it's not permissible, for example, for data to leave the borders of that geography. And then determining through deep knowledge of the type of workload that we're talking about, the characteristics of it, how sensitive the data is, what is most appropriate. And we're seeing this, for example, in the private sector, we're seeing this at the moment. There's a deep reflection in terms of the criticality and the sensitivity of data being used to fuel AI projects. Organizations who may have been very, very assertive about their move to cloud are looking at it, and they're not rejecting it, but they're being more intentional about what workloads they're putting where, for what purposes, with what economic expectations and in terms of what it will mean for their business. So there's never a right or wrong. It's contextual, and it really does depend on going back to a business objective, and I mean business in inverted commas in the context of a supervisory authority, but in terms of the mission, the mandate, what is most appropriate, and a very strong line coming from the highest levels of those organizations in terms of what is appropriate to do with technology and with what guardrails around it.
Thanks, Anne. Laurent, I saw you nodding there. Do you want to jump in with your perspective on this question as well?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and I think Anne brought up very important points in regards to what is it ultimately that we want to solve as a mission when we're migrating to different environments or we stay on premises for certain use cases. When you're thinking about the challenges that we mostly see, and Eugene mentioned procurement. It is different, right? When you're thinking about the procurement of on-premises resources, or you now change or have to change the process to consume cloud resources because everything is pretty much on demand, right? And you can just get it. You don't have supply chain challenges that you may have. And so there is ultimately a mind shift that needs to happen to be able to achieve that. In the US, I've seen that mind shift happen for the last 6 years in the public sector, but also on the private sector side, right? It's not very different in regards to making that mind shift. When we're thinking about the aspects, for example, of data locality and sovereignty, it's important to reiterate again, right, that when you're thinking about cloud, so for example, in AWS, we have 34 regions around the world, and we cater 45 countries and territories. It's physical data centers, right, that sit in those geographical areas, so it's not distributed somewhere. And so if there is, for example, a country that has data sovereignty requirements where we may not be in, there is the hybrid scenario as well, right? Where you can ultimately leverage the compute resources and put them within the country boundaries that the data is not leaving, for example, that environment.
Yeah, I think this point around kind of understanding the constraints and then working within them as a framework rather than as necessarily limitation to ambition. Eugene, I'm going to come back to you. You talked about some of the challenges, particularly around kind of technical expertise and building that understanding internally. Are there things that particularly helped, and in your collaboration with tech providers, are there ways that you can build that relationship that help to address some of those challenges?
Well, the industry, or at least the service provider, have been very collaborative in terms of upskilling and helping our internal IT team to learn more about cloud and about cloud technology. At the same time, having an open communication with them and their flexibility also to look at their own processes as well as their term and condition, their TNCs, also help pave the way um, to find a common ground where we can move forward. Definitely, at least for the BSP, we are very much interested to use cloud technology as we see the benefits of it, especially on deployment and scalability. And it also really addresses the lowering the total cost of ownership, which just like any other CIOs, whether it's a private or public institution, there's really a strong push to eliminate heavy investments in terms of data centers on-prem technology, etc.
Yeah, it's definitely a trend we're seeing among CIOs in large organizations. And you spoke earlier to some of the kind of fundamentals, I guess, around beginning collaboration. Would you like to talk to some of the specifics that you like to put in place to make sure that's as effective as possible.
Sure. So one of the things that we've been doing in IBM Cloud is running a program called the IBM Cloud for Financial Services Cloud Council. And what it is it started off as a very humble initiative about 4 years ago with 6 members who got together, and it started as a private sector initiative. It was essentially CIOs of large banks saying, we need a place where we can talk about the things that we're finding challenging, and we can actually talk about the real things that we're finding challenging and not skirt around them. Because what they were finding was that it was very difficult to find a forum where you could say what was really on your mind and not have somebody selling to you. So they got together and created this initiative, and it's gone from strength to strength. So from humble beginnings of 6 people, I think we're up to 170 now, from 100-ish distinct institutions. Some of them are users of IBM Cloud, not all by any stretch. Many of them are using hyperscale platforms. And what we do is bring them together into a forum through virtual meetings and in person. And we also bring in representatives from public authorities, policymakers, regulators, and supervisory authorities. And what it does is create quite a unique space where people can share in a very trusted way under Chatham House rule the challenges that they're finding, the successes that they're having, the things they wouldn't do again if they had 2020 vision, and have a bilateral dialogue with the other side of the fence, and realize actually that there is no fence, that we're all on the same side. We're just looking at the problem from a different direction. Nobody is ever arguing that financial stability is not a noble cause. Nobody is ever saying that there's anything wrong with pursuing digital operational resilience. However, there are challenges to be encountered along the way. So what we're finding is that it's helpful to break off a chunk of the big elephant of a problem statement and say, instead of just talking about it and admiring the problem, what could we do together to move the dial? So for example, with the council, some of the members contribute, some of them are more in the background, but we do have some very active ones. And we've managed to produce some documentary artifacts around managing risk in the cloud with cloud metrics. We've produced a paper in relation to how do you orchestrate testing operational resilience in a cloud environment, and how might you do it if you have to bring in third parties. We've been looking at frameworks for running AI workloads and managing it in a safe, secure, and risk managed way. So does it solve everything? No. However, there's a lot to be said for crowdsourcing wisdom, crowdsourcing learning, because there are certain areas where it makes sense for organizations to compete. But the tragic failing is when we compete on the things where it makes sense to collaborate. And building resilience and reducing risk, there's no competitive incentive there. So our contribution to this is creating that space where people can come together and share and debate. And sometimes the debates are very energetic. But it is quite a unique space where people don't have to posture. It's not like a supervisory examination. There's no consequence for sharing what's actually on your mind. So that's one of the areas where better dialogue and more learning is proving to be very, very impactful.
I think initiatives like that are so important, and it really resonates, obviously, with the work the centre does. A lot of our work is bringing together supervisors and regulators and industry and sharing knowledge. And I think the more that we can do that in the various spaces in the industry is so important. And I think also goes to the point Eugene made around the industry being helpful in upskilling around cloud and some of the technical aspects, because it is really a collaborative process to move things forwards from an innovation perspective. I'm going to go to the answers from the polls now. If we can bring up what the audience have said. while that is coming up, we've got a question from the audience, which is again aligned with this kind of challenges issue. So how can organizations and regulators overcome the challenges and risks of using cloud for SupTech solutions, such as vendor lock-ins, and you just mentioned sort of third-party challenges? Does anyone have some reflections on specifically those issues?
I'm happy to start. When you're thinking about clouds, right, we of course all have our own cloud native solutions, but ultimately a lot of the services that we provide as cloud providers are built on open source services and open source native services. So in the last few years, like we've seen quite large adoption, for example, on services like Kubernetes, right? That are containers, you have portability there, but in the same ways when you're thinking about large language models, right? Where you see, for example, customers using Llama models, etc., and other open source models as well. So the choice ultimately, when you're thinking about the consumption of cloud, is yours in regards to how you're building solutions. No cloud provider is going to come to you and say you got to use that service or that service or that service. So there is freedom there, and ultimately, we help you with the choice of, as Anne said in the beginning, which is key. What is the business problem that you're trying ultimately to solve, for the mission that you're after? And the security question, right, is always an interesting one, because there is a perception somehow that when you have something in your closet and you may have a few network connections, that's better than a cloud provider that runs millions of workloads, and highly sensitive ones, and some even national critical ones. And with the multiple decades that we have, like in AWS, when you're thinking about encryption, lots of it is encrypted by default today, right? You have the same hardware security modules that you have in the financial services industry, like the FIPS 140-2 level 3 and 4, and so on. So there's a lot there that we do, which is just part of the solution and not an afterthought when it comes to cybersecurity ultimately and resilience.
Philippa, if I may add.
Yeah, please, Eugene.
Right. So in terms of cloud-based solution, I think to address vendor lock-ins, it's really to ensure that your TNC doesn't lock you to a single provider. But at the same time, when you design the solution, part of it is really looking at data portability, allowing you to export data easily to various platforms. Now, it's easier said than done, but it's really one thing to consider. And as you try to do as you try to embed data portability design in your solution, you have to make sure that you also test how you can migrate data periodically. Don't wait until the time when you plan to shift to another provider. It's like a BCP. You have to also test how you can easily port your data just in case.
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense. Making sure you have the right protections in place whilst implementing these new solutions. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I'd love for each of you to be able to kind of leave the audience with one reflection that you think is a really important takeaway from the session today. Anne, would you like to kick off first?
So I think what I would encourage everybody who's looking at this space to do is do your best to break the silos in your organization. Cloud tends to be initially driven by technology teams, and that's very important. We need deep expertise, but we need to go wide and deep. So on that topic that we just covered, which is avoiding vendor lock-in, there's going to be a procurement aspect to that. There's going to be a legal aspect to that, but there's also going to be an architecture and design. There are going to need to be application owners involved. So what that means is having a Rubik's Cube of skills and bringing them together and learning to function like that. And it's not always easy. Often it's very difficult to start with, but that's where I've seen the most success, is when groups of people with cross-functional skills can come together, learn from each other, challenge each other, and add in all of those dimensions which are necessary to be able to be successfully short, mid, and long term.
Thanks, Anne. I think that's so important to kind of recognize all of the different components that need to come together there. Laurent, do you want to jump in next?
Sure. So, we talked in the last few days quite a bit about SupTech strategies, and especially when you're thinking about moving to the cloud, understanding where you want to go with your SupTech strategy is a key element of it. Because ultimately it drives your mission, it drives the journey that you ultimately are going to go through. And key here to understand this too, this is not like a once and move. It will be a staged journey ultimately in what you're deciding to migrate or build within cloud environments. So key here is to ultimately work with your technical teams, cloud providers, and business counterparts to ultimately drive the vision that you're looking for, and let us help as an industry to ultimately get you there.
Thank you very much. And Eugene.
Yeah. So I want to leave the session with this with this note, or with this statement that I read in the World Bank article. So that article, a section states, the motivation to explore SupTech solutions is often driven by two major forces. One is supervisory demand, and second is the technological innovation. First is demands on supervisory staff with limited resources drives effort on SupTech solution so that it can boost operational efficiency using technology. And on the other hand, the availability of new technologies present authorities, regulators, with opportunity to enhance the supervisory process. And so as we were discussing here, cloud as a SupTech enabler, but it doesn't stop here, right? As there's new technology coming in, AI, quantum computing, blockchain, these will all present new opportunities as well as challenges on how SupTech solution will eventually will evolve and will develop. And so we just have to, as what my co-panelist said, we just have to continue the dialogue, we continue the learning, not just within our institution, but also cross-sector, cross-organization, to fully embrace the changes in technology to advance SupTech solution for the future. So that's it, Philippa.
Thanks, Eugene. And yeah, I think there's so many fundamentals that we learn from implementing a technology, or one technology in a space, that can be transferred across other technologies, as you say. And I know we've had AI kind of woven into the discussions we've had today around cloud, which really enhances the discussion around scalability, around access, and around wider opportunities for the sector. Thank you all so much for your contributions and for your time. And thank you to the audience for joining us today, for your contributions and for your questions. And we look forward to seeing you for the rest of the sessions across SupTech Week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.